But you know, what you're talking about in terms of what Hicks was doing, in you know, in terms of subject matter. I mean, one of our viewers, Kevin Hoang 8.
Okay.
Hello, Kevin.
Hey, Kevin.
He said, talk about how Bill Hicks made comedy into an elevated art form and a form of social criticism, and how that influenced the comic. And I was kind of wondering, like, is it one of those things where to truly be considered a great comic, do you have to go into like the bigger world of social commentary, or can you just do dick jokes and be considered a great one? I
think Rodney Dangerfield is considered a great comedian, and he just did, you know, jokey jokes, you know, but he had a very strong persona. As a young comic, I thought that it was all about how clever I was. And then, but it's not. It's about you. It's about you, the comedian. And then, you know, there's this old saying that comedians don't say funny things, they say things funny. And I disagreed with that, and I was wrong. Okay. And comedians do comedians say things funny, and they sometimes say funny things funny. But if you've ever seen somebody say a funny thing in an unfunny way, you know the difference between a comedian and a writer.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those amazing things where, like, you could have 5 comics do the same verbatim joke, and some would get laughs and some wouldn't.
Yes.
And like, I remember when I first started out, I thought like, oh, I'm like more of a writer's comic, and so just the brilliance of my words will just make it all funny, and I'll just get that. And at first I thought, oh, I'll be like a fast talker. So like, I'll kind of rattle through all these excellently written jokes, and people will just laugh. And then I realized, oh, well, that doesn't work at all. First of all, that puts a lot of pressure on how good your writing is.
Yeah.
Second of all, I remember a friend of mine telling me, like, I did some joke where I rattled off like 8 things, like a list of 8 things, and he's like, why don't you just pick like the 2 or 3 best ones? I was like, that's a good idea. And then like, and then as I started watching more comedy and seeing guys who, you know, you can get a laugh by being quiet, by not saying, by saying something and then giving a reaction, and you get a laugh, and that laugh is every bit as legit as any other kind of laugh that you would get. We mentioned a little bit about, you know, kind of onstage persona, and there's a part that when I was rewatching American that it really kind of resonated strongly with me when Bill Hicks leaves LA and he goes back to Houston. And he said, like, he had just realized that the gulf between him and Richard Pryor was enormous in terms of where they were as people in comics, and he didn't know how to get there. He just knew that it was far away. And there's this concept in comedy that I think most people haven't heard. Well, people have heard of the idea of finding your voice, but in comedy this has this whole other connotation, and it is a odyssey that a comic must go on. Like, what does finding your voice mean to you, and how, do you think you're there?
Well, Jerry Seinfeld said that it takes 5 years to be a good comedian and 10 years to be a great one.
Is that 10 years added onto the 5, or is it 10 altogether?
No, I think 10 altogether. Okay. But, you know, I mean, that's if you have it in you to be great, you know? And that's if you're diligent and you work really hard. Because talent is one thing, but skill and craft are another. And the way you get to be a consistent performer is through consistently working your talent and not just relying on it. Does that make sense, right? So it's about, I just saw this thing, Will Smith talked about this, about how he might not be the talented guy, but he's going to outwork you. And that is true, you know, and I see a lot of talented guys, you know, flounder. Talent can only take you so far. It's hard work, skill, and craft that takes you the rest of the way. And Bill had all that stuff. He was a diligent performer. He was a diligent writer. You know, how many nights a year he was performing, and he was on the road all the time. Right. So I forget what the question was.
Oh, just about in terms of finding your voice. I mean, do you think that you have, or how long did it take, or?
You know, I think it's one of those things that you kind of realize after you've been doing it for a while. I've had young comics say to me, yeah, I think I found my voice. I'm like, when they say find your voice, it's just like, after a while, you look at a body of work and you go, oh, I have a point of view. This is who I am. And it's kind of like you don't like set out to discover it. It kind of just reveals itself to you the more you do.
Right.
Like the more you keep trying and you try different kinds of things, and then you just kind of settle into a certain thing. It's not like you decide that's not me or that's not me. It's just like you find yourself doing the same things or the same type of humor.
Same themes and styles.
Yes, same style, same thing. And you try to just figure out what's unique about you. So yes, I think I've certainly found my voice, but it didn't, you know, it took me a while. I used to talk a little bit about my family and a little bit about this and a little bit about that, and I still do a lot. Like George Carlin still had a bunch of wordplay jokes, and then he would have his social commentary, then he would have his sex jokes, but it was all that same kind of George Carlin through line, and that's what I've kind of developed, this kind of outsider way to look at things, like a common man applying logic to the world, and what's illogical about it is what's funny.